The girl's story had started at a rest stop in Georgia, but it didn't end there. It continued in every classroom where children learned the signal, in every community meeting where people shared safety tips, in every moment someone chose to pay attention instead of looking away. Sometimes the most powerful changes start with the smallest actions. A tucked thumb, a closed fist, and the courage to ask for help. 1 month after that fateful day at the Georgia rest stop, the story had touched hearts across the nation. The local news station's meeting room was packed with reporters and cameras, all gathered to hear from the brave young girl who had used a simple hand signal to save herself. The girl sat between her mother and the Marine, wearing a bright yellow dress that matched her confident smile. Her braids were decorated with sunny beads that clicked softly when she moved. She looked different now, stronger, taller somehow, as if the weight of fear had been lifted from her shoulders. "I learned that signal from social media," she explained to the gathered crowd, her voice clear and steady. "My friends and I used to practice it as a game. We never thought we'd actually need it." She demonstrated the motion again, thumb tucked into palm, fingers closed over it. Dozens of phones recorded the moment, ensuring more people would learn this crucial gesture. The Marine, still uncomfortable with being called a hero, shared his perspective. "The real hero is sitting right here," he said, nodding toward the girl. She kept her cool, remembered her training, and found a way to ask for help. That's what we call tactical thinking in the Marines. Behind them, a screen showed statistics that shocked many viewers. Hundreds of children saved in the past year because of this signal, countless others helped because someone was paying attention. The girl's story had already inspired a new training program for rest stop employees across the country. Her mother spoke next, her voice strong despite the emotion behind her words. "My daughter's story isn't just about a rescue. It's about how we can all help protect each other. It's about paying attention to the small signs that something isn't right." She reached for her daughter's hand, squeezing it gently. The police chief stepped up to the podium, his badge catching the light. Since this incident, reports of the signal being recognized have increased by 300%. People are more aware, more willing to get involved. That's the real impact of this story. It's teaching us all to look out for each other. A video played on the screen showing self-defense classes where young people learned not just the hand signal, but other ways to stay safe and alert. The girl had visited one of these classes last week, sharing her story with other kids her age. The instructor said attendance had doubled since then. The Marine's phone buzzed constantly now with messages from his old unit. His fellow Marines had spread the story through their networks, making sure every base, every training center, included the signal in their community awareness programs. "Sometimes the smallest tool can be the most powerful weapon," he told the audience. "That's what this signal is, a weapon against fear, against silence." The girls' school had started a safety awareness club, with students teaching each other about various safety signals and signs. The club's first meeting had so many students that they had to move it to the gymnasium. "Kids are really interested in learning how to protect themselves and others," the girl explained. "We're not scared, we're getting stronger." After the press conference, in a quiet moment, the girl showed a letter she'd received from another child who had used the same signal to get help. "That's what makes me most happy," she said, her eyes bright. "Knowing that sharing my story is helping other kids find their courage." Her mother had started volunteering with a child safety organization, speaking to parent groups about the importance of teaching children about safety without scaring them. "Knowledge is power," she often said, "and power shared is power multiplied." The rest stop where it all happened had put up a small plaque, not naming any names, but reminding travelers that heroes come in all sizes and that sometimes the bravest act is simply asking for help. The Marines stopped by occasionally, making sure the new safety protocols were being followed. As the press conference wound down, the girl stood up, surprising everyone with an unplanned speech. "I want everyone who sees this to know something," she said, her voice carrying clearly through the room. "You're never too young to be brave, and you're never too busy to pay attention. One small action can change everything." The cameras flashed, capturing the moment as she demonstrated the signal one last time. In living rooms and classrooms across the country, people watched and learned, remembering that sometimes the smallest gestures can have the biggest impact. Outside the news station, life went on as usual. Cars passed by, People hurried to and from work, children played in nearby parks. But something had changed in this community, and the change was spreading. People were looking up from their phones more often, paying attention to their surroundings, ready to help if needed. The local police station buzzed with activity, but in a small private room, time seemed to stand still. The girl sat wrapped in a fresh blanket, holding a cup of hot chocolate that a kind-faced officer had brought her. Her colorful braids caught the fluorescent light as she stared at the door waiting. They told her that her mom was coming, that she was only minutes away. The detective sat nearby, not too close, giving the girl the space she needed while staying protectively present. They'd already taken her statement, keeping the questions gentle and letting her take breaks whenever the memories became too much. Now all that was left was the moment they'd been working toward. Outside, a car door slammed. Footsteps echoed down the hallway, quick, urgent steps. The girl's hands tightened around her cup, her eyes fixed on the door. Then it opened and time started moving again. "Baby?" The woman in the doorway was still wearing her work uniform, her hair windblown from the drive. For a moment, mother and daughter just stared at each other, as if neither could believe this moment was real. Then the cup of hot chocolate was forgotten as the girl launched herself across the room. "Mama." The sound was somewhere between a cry and a whisper. They collided in the middle of the room, holding each other so tightly it looked like they'd never let go. The mother's tears fell into her daughter's braids as she ran her hands over her child's face, shoulders, arms, checking, making sure she was really there, really okay. "I looked everywhere," she kept saying, her voice breaking. "I drove every street, called everyone. I knew you'd find a way to let someone know. I knew you were smart enough, brave enough." The detective quietly stepped out, giving them privacy, but through the door's window, she could see the Marines still waiting in the hallway. He'd followed them to the station, wanting to make sure everything worked out. Now he stood at parade rest, his military bearing softening as he watched the reunion through the window. A senior officer approached him, holding out a cup of coffee. "That hand signal," the officer said, "we've been training people to recognize it, but you're the first one in our jurisdiction to actually spot it in the field." The Marine accepted the coffee with a nod, his eyes still on the room where mother and daughter sat together on a small couch, the girl showing her mom the secret signal she used. Inside the room, the girl was finally letting herself cry, not the silent tears she'd learned to hide over the past 4 days, but real sobs that shook her whole body. Her mom held her through it all, rocking her like she was small again, murmuring soft words of comfort and love. "You're my brave, brilliant girl," her mother whispered, wiping tears from her daughter's cheeks. "You remembered that signal from your social media. You didn't give up." The pride in her voice made fresh tears spill over, but now they were mixed with smiles. The detective returned with a social worker who carried a folder of resources, support groups, counseling services, community organizations ready to help them rebuild their sense of security. The mother accepted them with one hand, her other arm still firmly around her daughter. Through the window, they could see more officers gathering, sharing quiet congratulations. Cases like this didn't always end this way. Today was a victory, not just for one family, but for everyone who'd helped create and spread awareness about that simple hand signal. The Marine finally turned to leave, his work done. But the girl saw him through the window and waved, a real wave this time, not a secret signal. He waved back, and her mother stood up to thank him properly. "Wait," she called, stepping into the hallway. "Please, what made you notice? What made you pay attention when so many others didn't?" He paused, choosing his words carefully. In the Marines, they teach us that the most important weapon we have isn't our training or our equipment, it's our awareness. Today, your daughter was brave enough to signal, and I was just lucky enough to be paying attention. The mother hugged him then, a quick, fierce embrace full of gratitude that words couldn't express. The girl joined them, her eyes bright with tears, but also with something else now, pride, strength, and the beginning of healing. As the afternoon sun slanted through the station windows, more people arrived, family members, close friends, all responding to the news that their loved one was safe. The small room filled with hugs, tears, and quiet thanks. Sometimes the biggest changes start with the smallest actions, a hand signal, a moment of attention, a choice to get involved. Today, Those small things had come together to bring her daughter back to her mother's arms. The Georgia sun hung high in the cloudless sky as the Marine made his move. Walking with casual confidence, he approached the SUV's driver's side window, raising his hand in a friendly wave. "Hey there," he called out, his voice warm and engaging. "Sorry to bother you, but I think one of your tires might be running a bit low. Mind if I take a look?" The man in the SUV hesitated, his fingers tightening on the steering wheel. The girl held her breath, watching the scene unfold through the windshield. She could feel the tension radiating from the man beside her, like heat from an overworked engine. "That's very kind," the man replied, his voice straining to sound normal, "but we're fine. Just taking a quick break before getting back on the road." His eyes darted to the rearview mirror again, where he could see more people gathering in the parking lot. What he didn't realize was that many of them were plainclothes officers moving into position with practiced precision. The Marine kept his friendly smile in place, positioning himself strategically between the driver's door and the exit path. "I insist," he said, pointing toward the rear tire. "I'm a mechanic by trade, and that tire looks pretty concerning. Wouldn't want you folks having trouble on the interstate." Meanwhile, a woman who appeared to be talking on her phone walked past the passenger side of the SUV. She was actually the detective, and her careful glance through the window confirmed what they needed to know. No immediate weapons visible, the child appeared physically unharmed. The man's composure started to crack. Sweat beaded on his forehead despite the air conditioning. "Look, we really need to get going," he said, his hand moving toward the gear shift. But before he could act, something unexpected happened. A large recreational vehicle pulled into the space in front of the SUV, effectively blocking it in. The timing wasn't accidental. The RV was driven by another officer executing a carefully coordinated plan. More travelers, actually officers in plain clothes, had gathered nearby, appearing to study the rest stop's map display. The Marine leaned casually against the SUV's doorframe, his body language relaxed, but his position making it impossible for the man to exit without causing a scene. "You know," he said conversationally, "my daughter's about her age." He nodded toward the girl. "Kids grow up so fast these days, don't they?" The man's face paled slightly. He hadn't told anyone the girl was his daughter, hadn't made any claims about their relationship at all. The slip was subtle, but it was enough. His eyes darted between the Marine and the rearview mirror, finally noticing how the casual travelers around his vehicle were moving with too much purpose, their positions too precise to be random. The girl watched as more people surrounded the SUV, her heart pounding so hard she thought it might burst. These weren't ordinary travelers anymore. Their movements were coordinated, professional. She saw the detective catch her eye through the window and give her a reassuring nod. "Sir," the Marine said, his voice taking on an edge of authority, "I'm going to need you to turn off the engine." As he spoke, the others dropped their casual poses. Badges appeared. The charade was over. The man's hand shut toward the center console, but before he could reach it, the Marine had the door open and the keys out of the ignition in one smooth movement. Years of training made the action look almost effortless, but his grip was iron-strong. Everything happened at once then. The passenger door opened, and gentle hands helped the girl out of the SUV. The detective wrapped a blanket around her shoulders, shielding her from the stares of actual travelers who had stopped to watch the scene. The man was quickly secured, his protests drowned out by the professional commands of the officers. The girl stood trembling beside the detective, watching as her 4-day nightmare ended in a matter of minutes. The other travelers at the rest stop were being directed away from the scene, some taking photos with their phones before the officers asked them to move along. The Marine stepped back, letting the professionals take over, but he caught the girl's eye one last time. She mouthed a silent "thank you," her shoulders finally relaxing under the blanket. He gave her a gentle smile and a respectful nod, the same one he'd give to any brave soldier who'd made it through a tough mission. The rest stop was returning to normal around them, most travelers unaware they'd just witnessed the end of a desperate search and the beginning of a healing journey. The girl watched as the officers led the man away, her hands still trembling but her spirit stronger. She'd taken a chance, made a signal, and been heard. Sometimes that's all it takes to change everything. The first police car pulled into the rest stop quietly, no lights or sirens, just another vehicle joining the steady stream of travelers. The officer behind the wheel was wearing sunglasses, but her eyes were sharp as she scanned the parking lot, quickly spotting the silver SUV the Marine had described. 2 more unmarked cars followed, their drivers looking like ordinary travelers as they strategically positioned their vehicles. Inside the SUV, the man was getting anxious. His fingers drummed against the steering wheel as he watched another police car enter the rest stop. The girl could feel the change in his mood, the way his breathing got faster, how his eyes kept darting to the rearview mirror. She sat absolutely still, the way a rabbit freezes when it senses a hawk overhead. The Marine was still nearby, pretending to check his phone while actually coordinating with dispatch. "Subject is becoming agitated," he murmured into his phone. The child appears unharmed but frightened. His careful observation had already revealed something crucial: the man's new clothes, the recently purchased SUV, the way both of them were wearing items that still had the fresh-from-the-store look. All signs pointing to someone trying to establish a new identity in a hurry. A detective in plain clothes approached the Marine, looking like just another traveler asking for directions. "We ran the plates," she said quietly, pretending to look at his phone. "The vehicle was purchased 3 days ago in cash. The registration matches an identity we believe is false." She paused, checking something on her own phone. "There's an Amber alert from Tennessee. The description matches." The summer heat pressed down on the rest stop as more travelers came and went, unaware of the drama unfolding in their midst. A family with 3 kids walked past the SUV, the children arguing about who got to choose the next road trip music. The man inside the vehicle watched them pass, his hand moving toward the center console again. The detective's voice remained calm but took on an urgent edge. "We've got confirmation. The girl was reported missing 4 days ago. The suspect matches security footage from her neighborhood." She looked at her phone again, but this time she was receiving real-time updates from her team. "The man's using a stolen identity. His real name's showing up in a database for previous offenses." The Marine noticed how the man's attention kept returning to the rest stop's exit. One wrong move now could turn this into a dangerous situation. He'd seen enough hostile scenarios to know that the next few minutes would be critical. The police were moving into position, but they needed to do it without causing panic among the other travelers. Another officer, dressed like a maintenance worker, was checking the trash cans near the SUV, getting close enough to confirm what they were dealing with. His hand brushed his hip where his weapon was concealed, ready but hoping he wouldn't need it. The girl watched him through the window, her dark eyes wide with a mix of hope and fear. The detective received another update through her earpiece. "Mother's been notified," she whispered to the Marine. "She's on her way from Tennessee. Positive ID from the photos you sent." She paused, her expression hardening. "This guy's been wanted in 3 states. He's been doing this for months, approaching young girls, pretending to be an adoptive parent or family friend." The temperature in the SUV must have been rising because the man reached to adjust the air conditioning. The movement made his jacket shift, and the Marine caught a glimpse of something in his waistband. He quietly relayed this information to the detective, who immediately updated her team. More families were pulling into the rest stop now, the lunch hour bringing a new wave of travelers. The officers had to move carefully, too many innocent people around, too many things that could go wrong. They needed to get the girl out safely without putting anyone else at risk. The detective made a decision. "We're moving in," she said softly. "Be ready." She turned away, pretending to walk toward the building while actually coordinating with her team through her hidden mic. The Marine stayed where he was, ready to intercept if the suspect tried to run, watching as the carefully planned operation began to unfold. The girl in the SUV could sense something was about to happen. Her hands were clasped so tightly in her lap that her knuckles had gone pale, but her face remained carefully blank. She'd learned to hide her emotions over the past few days, but now she was hiding hope instead of fear. Help was coming. She just had to stay strong for a little bit longer. The Marine had seen a lot during his 15 years of service, but something about this situation made every instinct he developed snap to attention. He kept his posture relaxed, maintaining what looked like a casual stance against his car while his mind raced through his options. The hand signal he'd just witnessed wasn't something you saw by accident. It was too specific, too deliberate. 20 feet away, he could see the man returning to the SUV, whistling a tune that seemed out of place in the heavy afternoon air. The Marine's training kicked in automatically, early 50s, about 6 feet tall, expensive watch, clothes that looked newly bought. Something about the man's body language set off alarm bells, the way he scanned the parking lot while pretending not to, how his casual stride was just a little too practiced. He pressed his phone closer to his ear, speaking quietly but clearly to the 911 dispatcher. "I'm at the Highway 75 rest stop, mile marker 167. Possible child endangerment situation." His free hand typed out the SUV's license plate number, making it look like he was just checking emails. Years of surveillance training were paying off. Nobody in the busy rest stop area seemed to notice anything unusual about him. The dispatcher's voice came through, professional and focused. "Officers are en route. Can you stay on the line and maintain visual contact?" The Marine gave a slight nod, though she couldn't see it. His mind flashed back to the domestic violence prevention briefing he'd attended just last month. The instructor had shown them that same hand signal, explained how it had already saved lives. A warm breeze rustled through the pine trees lining the parking lot, carrying the smell of hot asphalt and fast food from the nearby restaurants. A group of teenagers walked past, laughing about something on their phones. The contrast between their carefree attitude and the tension he felt made everything seem surreal. He watched as the man got back into the SUV. The girl's posture changed instantly, supple but clear to trained eyes. The way she seemed to make herself smaller, how her shoulders hunched forward slightly. The Marine had seen that body language before, in war zones and crisis areas. It was the universal sign of someone trying to avoid attention, trying to become invisible. "Units are 5 minutes out," the dispatcher updated him. "State Patrol is coordinating with local law enforcement. Can you describe any weapons or immediate threats?" The Marine kept his voice low and steady, describing what he could see without obviously staring at the vehicle. His peripheral vision caught the man reaching for something in the center console. The rest stop was getting busier now as another wave of travelers pulled in. A young mother struggled with a stroller near the SUV, and the Marine saw his opportunity. He pushed off from his car, making a show of offering to help her. The position gave him a better angle to observe the suspect's vehicle while looking like nothing more than a good Samaritan. Through the SUV's windows, he could see the girl's hands clasped tightly in her lap. The man was talking to her, his mouth moving in what looked like calm words, but the Marine noticed how the girl flinched at whatever was being said. 15 years of combat experience had taught him to trust his gut, and right now his gut was screaming that this child was in danger. The sound of distant sirens made him tense, but years of training kept his face neutral. He needed to make sure the man didn't spook and try to drive away. The rest stop's entrance was designed with only one way in and out. If the suspect tried to run, it would put everyone in danger. "Thank you for your help with the stroller," the young mother said, smiling as she walked away. The Marine returned her smile while positioning himself closer to the SUV, ready to block its exit if necessary. His heart rate was steady, the same calm focus he'd felt in much more obvious danger zones. Sometimes the most important battles weren't fought with weapons, but with patience and careful observation. The sirens were getting louder now. He could see the man in the SUV starting to notice too, his head turning slightly toward the sound. The Marine's muscles tensed, ready to move if needed. The girl's eyes met his for just a second through the window, and he gave her the smallest of nods. Help was coming. She just needed to hold on for a few more minutes. Years of training and experience had prepared him for moments like this, when being in the right place at the right time wasn't enough. You also had to know what to look for, how to respond, and most importantly, when to act. As the first police car pulled into the rest stop, he knew the next few moments would be crucial. Everything would depend on keeping the situation calm for just a little longer. The young girl's heart was pounding against her ribs as she watched the man disappear into the rest stop building. She knew she had maybe 3 minutes, 4 at most, before he would return. Her hands were trembling as she recalled the video she'd seen months ago on her friend's phone during lunch break at school. The signal seemed so simple back then. Tuck your thumb into your palm, then close your fingers over it, like you're making a fist but hiding your thumb inside. She remembered giggling with her friends as they practiced it, none of them thinking they'd ever need to use it for real. But now, sitting in that SUV with the Georgia sun beating down through the windows, that simple gesture felt like her only lifeline. Through the windshield, she could see the Marine still standing by his car. He was wearing a faded blue t-shirt that had seen better days, and his military cap was pulled low over his eyes, but she could tell he was alert, aware. That's what gave her hope. He seemed to notice everything around him, unlike the other travelers who were lost in their own worlds. She took a deep breath and raised her hand, trying to make it look natural, like she was just stretching or fixing her hair. The first attempt was clumsy. Her fingers wouldn't stop shaking. She glanced toward the restroom building, her chest tightening when she didn't see the man coming back yet. One more try. This time she did it just like in the video. Thumb tucked in, fingers wrapped around, then release and do it again. The Marine's head tilted slightly, and for a heart-stopping moment, their eyes met. She saw something change in his expression, a subtle shift from casual observation to focused attention. But she couldn't keep looking at him. The man had taught her that drawing attention was bad, that people who asked questions were dangerous. She'd learned over the past few days to keep her eyes down, to speak only when spoken to. The bruise hidden under her sleeve was a constant reminder of what happened when she didn't follow his rules. A family walked past the SUV, a mom holding a little boy's hand while he chattered about wanting a snack from the vending machine. The girl felt tears pricking at her eyes, but she blinked them back. Crying wasn't allowed either. Instead, she forced herself to breathe slowly, just like her school counselor had taught her for handling test anxiety. In, hold out. In, hold out. She risked another glance at the Marine. He had moved slightly, positioning himself where he could see both the SUV and the restroom building. His phone was still in his hand, but she noticed he was typing now, his fingers moving quickly across the screen. Was he calling for help? Or had he not understood her signal at all? The blast of a truck's air brakes from the nearby parking area made her jump. Everything felt amplified. The rustle of trees in the hot breeze, the slam of car doors, the distant hum of traffic on the interstate. A bead of sweat rolled down her back, and her mouth felt dry as sandpaper. She saw movement near the building and her stomach dropped. The man was coming back. Her time was up. Had the Marine understood? Would anyone help her? The question swirled in her mind like leaves in a storm as she quickly placed her hands in her lap, trying to look exactly as she had when he left. The Marine was still there, but now he was talking on his phone, his voice too low to hear through the closed windows. His posture had changed. There was tension in his shoulders that hadn't been there before. She wanted to believe he had understood, that help was coming, but she'd learned the hard way not to trust and hope too much. The man's footsteps on the asphalt grew closer. She could hear him whistling. He always whistled when he was in a good mood, and somehow that was worse than when he was angry. The door handle clicked, and she forced herself to stay still, to keep breathing normally, even as every instinct screamed at her to run. What happened in the next few minutes would change everything. But sitting there, waiting, she didn't know if that change would be for better or worse. All she knew was that she'd taken her chance, made her silent cry for help. Now all she could do was pray that someone had been paying attention at exactly the right moment. The summer heat was beating down on Interstate 75 as cars whizzed past the green highway signs. It was just another busy afternoon in Georgia, where the air felt thick enough to slice with a knife. A silver SUV merged into the right lane, its turn signal blinking steadily as it approached the upcoming rest stop. Inside the vehicle, a 12-year-old girl with beautiful dark skin and braided hair adorned with colorful beads sat quietly in the passenger seat. Her eyes kept darting between the window and the man behind the wheel, a middle-aged white man who called himself her adoptive father. Something about the way he gripped the steering wheel, knuckles white with tension, made her stomach twist into knots. The SUV pulled into the rest stop, tires crunching over the sun-baked asphalt. The place was fairly busy, with families stretching their legs and truckers taking their mandatory breaks. The smell of fresh coffee wafted from the vending machines near the main building, mixing with the scent of pine trees that lined the parking area. "Need to use the bathroom?" the man asked, his voice carrying an edge that most people wouldn't notice, but the girl had learned to recognize all too well. She nodded silently, keeping her eyes down like she'd been told. Her heart was racing, though her face remained carefully neutral, another skill she picked up over the past few days. As they parked between a red pickup truck and a minivan full of travel stickers, she noticed a man in a clean-cut t-shirt and jeans stepping out of his car a few spots away. His military bearing was obvious in the way he carried himself, and a Marine Corps baseball cap sat firmly on his head. The girl's mind started racing. She'd seen something on TikTok a few months ago, something about a hand signal. Maybe, just maybe. The rest stop was like hundreds of others scattered across the country's highways, weather-beaten picnic tables, vending machines humming in the afternoon heat, and maps displayed behind smudged plexiglass. But today, this ordinary place would become the setting for something extraordinary. A family of 4 walked past their SUV, the parents herding 2 energetic kids toward the restrooms. The girl watched them longingly, remembering similar trips with her real family. Her fingers twisted nervously in her lap as she gathered her courage. She knew she might only get one chance to signal for help. The Marine was taking his time, stretching his legs after what looked like a long drive. He pulled out his phone, seemingly absorbed in checking messages, but his trained eyes continuously scanned his surroundings, a habit born from years of service. "I'll be right back," the man said, his tone carrying that familiar warning. "You know the rules." The girl nodded again, her heart thundering so loud she was sure everyone in the rest stop could hear it. As soon as he stepped out of the SUV, she felt like she could breathe just a little easier, but she knew her window of opportunity would be small. Through the windshield, she watched him walk toward the restroom building, his casual stride masking the controlled way he looked around to make sure no one was paying too much attention to their vehicle. The girl's palms were sweaty now, and she wiped them nervously on her shorts. The Marine had moved to lean against his car, still looking at his phone but positioned where he had a clear view of the parking lot. The girl took a deep breath, remembering everything she'd seen in that social media video about the domestic violence signal, the one that had gone viral and saved other lives. This wasn't just a regular rest stop break anymore. In the next few moments, everything could change. She just needed someone, anyone, to recognize her silent cry for help. The weight of her situation pressed down on her shoulders as she prepared to take the biggest risk she'd taken since this nightmare began. Little did anyone at that busy rest stop know that they were about to become part of a story that would later grip the nation's attention. For now, it was just another hot Georgia afternoon, with cars pulling in and out, families chattering, and the endless hum of the interstate in the background. But sometimes the most important moments happen in the most ordinary places, when the right person is paying attention at exactly the right time.